Hello, Laura Koonsberg. I didn't see you last week. You were away.
I was away and you were away. We were both away. Lucky us.
But lucky listener, lucky newscaster, they got better people.
I'm sure they did. So sorry if you're
Sorry,
disappointed
everyone.
that we're back, but here we are.
Here we go. Mind you, you're on form with a scoop.
Yes, I've been talking to Kamala Harris.
Fab.
I know, that was very exciting because, well, it's not that common that you get to just casually have a conversation with someone who came quite close to becoming the president of the United States of America. So yes, it was really intriguing to speak to her. Really, really interesting.
And it's a busy news weekend as well.
It is, with some you couldn't possibly make it up stories, which there have been plenty of already this week. But I think we have hit peak 2025 and peak phase 2 for Keir Starmer's government, who seem to have managed to lose a sex offender who ought not to have been allowed to walk off down the high street, who instead was meant to be being deported. So a very serious, but also a really kind of what story that the government is struggling to handle at the moment.
Just as they have picked the in-house deputy leadership candidate.
Yes, described to me as another example of Keir Starmer's reverse Midas touch. Lucy Powell has become the deputy leader of the Labour Party. So the woman who Keir Starmer deemed wasn't good enough to be in the cabinet a few short weeks ago is now his number 2. That's not awkward, is it?
Well, I think the newscast finished for today.
Thank goodness for that.
Chris Mason will be coming in on Saturday's newscast.
Hello, it's Laura in the studio.
It's Paddy in the studio. Hello.
And as you said, Chris will be here shortly. And so if he walks in during our conversation, he's not being rude. He's just a man doing the news. So a man in a hurry.
So let's get to the scoop with the US presidential candidate, as was Kamala Harris.
And intriguingly, somebody who quite clearly, from my take, wants to be again a presidential candidate.
Really?
I very much think so. So you and I have both interviewed lots of politicians over the years, and they're sometimes a bit coy, aren't they, when you ask them a big question, something like, are you going to try and become the president again after you lost in a very bruising way to Donald Trump last year? And she's done a few interviews in America of late because she has a book out called 107 Days about, guess what, her campaign. And in those interviews, which we watched kind of carefully before we sat down with her this week, when she was asked about her future, she would say things like, oh, well, I'm not focusing on that right now. Oh, maybe not. No, I'm just not thinking about that at the moment. I'm just, listening to people and taking some time out and concentrating on my book and all those kinds of things. She went quite a bit further than that in our conversation. And she said, well, should we listen instead? In terms then of what is next for you, you write very powerfully about the differences that many women have made to your life, whether that was your meeting with Angela Merkel or the experience of growing up with your extraordinary mother or the stories of your baby nieces, Amara and Leela. When are they going to see a woman in charge in the White House?
In their lifetime, for sure.
Could it be you?
Possibly.
Have you made a decision yet?
No, I have not.
But you say in your book, I'm not done.
That is correct. I am not done. I have lived my entire career a life of service, and it's in my bones. And there are many ways to serve. I've not decided yet what I will do in the future beyond what I am doing right now.
But you've been very clear that it's a possibility you might run again to become president. And in my experience interviewing politicians, when someone says I'm not done, it means they are thinking seriously about running. But when you look at the bookies' odds, they put you as an outsider, even behind Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I mean, is that underestimating you?
I think there are all kinds of polls that will tell you a variety of things. I've never listened to polls. If I listened to polls, I would have not run for my first office or my second office, and I certainly wouldn't be sitting here in this interview.
Ooh, bit of steel at the end there.
So, Paddy, if I were doing a political pub quiz and I were to ask you, politician says, I'm not done, it's in my bones, but I haven't made a decision yet. What do you think they're trying to tell us?
She a runner.
Well, that was very much the impression that I got.
Wow.
You can tell she hasn't made a final decision, right? In America, partly it's also about the Benjamin's baby, isn't it? You know, she was a well-criticised candidate. But she didn't manage to beat Trump.
Big contrast to Hillary Clinton, made it plain that was bust.
Absolutely. And that is not where she is at all. She clearly believes that she still has a lot to offer. She clearly is still full of ambition, despite what was a very bruising defeat. And we talk elsewhere in the interview about what she thinks went wrong, what her vision or the Democrats' vision for America next time round ought to be. And of course, I also asked her about the controversy about Joe Biden's health. But I have to wait till tomorrow to hear what she said about that.
Fair enough.
But it's plain one of the reasons that she is thinking about running, which I think is obvious that she is, not just because she's got ambition left in her and it's in her bones, but because she is horrified by what she sees happening in Trump's America. And she's clearly deeply unhappy about what she's going on. This is her take.
In the campaign, you said Donald Trump was a fascist. Do you think he's running a fascist authoritarian government?
I was asked if he was a fascist, and I said yes. And the reason is that I look at what is happening right now. And again, it is what I predicted. He said he would weaponize the Department of Justice. He has done exactly that. He has used the United States Department of Justice, which should be an independent agency that makes decisions based on fact and law and not personal vengeance of the President of the United States. You look at what has happened in terms of how he has weaponized, for example, the federal agencies around going after political satirists who his skin is so thin, he couldn't endure criticism from a joke and attempted to shut down an entire media organization in the process.
And you are critical of billionaires and other institutions bowing down, capitulation.
There are not all, but there are many that have capitulated since day one, who are bending the knee at the foot of a tyrant, I believe, for many reasons, including they want to be next to power because they want to perhaps have a merger approved or avoid an investigation. And it is a crying shame that when push comes to shove, we can't count on the titans of industry to at least posture in a way that is about maintaining the guardrails around a democracy and democratic system.
I mean, if we all wind ourselves out a bit, of course, she and Donald Trump were bitter political rivals. It is extraordinary that we have in 2025 arrived in a situation where somebody who was the second most powerful person in America for several years feels comfortable, even perhaps feels a duty to say in their view that they think the leader of the free world is a fascist and an authoritarian and a tyrant.
Yeah.
That is an extraordinary place to be.
It is very much a commentary on where we've reached with trying to cover the United States, which is now a very polarised place. She is missing certain bits from the account. Number one, the American people knew who they were voting for. They were voting for the same man, Donald Trump, who had called the previous election, who had wrongly called the previous election stolen. When the American people voted for Donald Trump, they were voting for that man, partly because the Democrats ran such a hapless campaign, say Democrats, and ran a candidate who should not have been run, say Democrats. I've spoken to several of them, including the governor of California,
Gavin Newsom, who's no love lost between him and Kamala Harris,
Right,
rival Californian politician.
But let's just say, that's also true. The Democrats were seen by Democrats to have completely failed to run a sensible election for the White House. That happened as well.
Indeed, it happened as well. And when you ask, therefore, the White House for their opinion on what Kamala Harris has said to us in the last couple of days, it's very interesting because the White House quite often chooses not to respond to whatever story is flying around, but they did choose to respond to Kamala Harris. They said Kamala Harris lost the election in a landslide. She should have taken the hint. The American people don't care about her absurd lies. Or maybe she did take the hint and that's why she's airing her grievances to foreign publications.
That's you.
That's us. That's the BBC. And you're right. America's in this place where you have people on two different sides of the political debate who are implacably opposed to each other in a way that is incredibly deep. And our brothers and sisters at Americast obviously talk about this with more knowledge and more insight than we do. But, you know, it's our turn at the moment. And they've just got to this position. What Kamala Harris is also, which won't surprise you, she's eager to emphasize, is that the popular vote was really very close. There was less than 2% in it. But that's like a politician in this country complaining about the first past the post system. It's not how you win in America. You win by winning the Electoral College, where each state has a certain number of voters. And Donald Trump trounced her in the Electoral College. He got more than 300 votes. But you can tell she has a certain, I think you can hear it in her voice. You know, she was a criticised candidate for all sorts of reasons. The Democrats don't really seem to have done much productive soul searching yet about what really went wrong or where they should go next. But I think you can hear in her voice there's still fire there. She's not ready to pack up and disappear.
There's many questions for the Democrats. They're accused of fighting the last campaign. She's trying to refresh it by saying the things that he's done smack of fascism or are fascist. So she's trying to reinvent her criticism of him. And there will be newscasters who probably agree with her. But I just wonder, since we can't do the whole interview, what's the behind the scenes like of doing a big set piece with a US politician of this caliber? Anything kind of groovy going on in the background?
It's like a military operation. Incredibly controlled, incredibly carefully choreographed, incredibly tense with aides standing around looking at their watches. Oh, we shall be here in 2 minutes. So we shall be here in 1 minute. Oh, which chair is it going to be? Oh no, she prefers to be in that chair. This, incredibly controlled. And also there's just something, I think lots of newscasters maybe feel this too, but British journalists often, we're all a bit like starry-eyed about American politics because it's just bigger and glossier, and doesn't mean it's better, but it's different. And I suppose it's more showbiz, right? It's more showbiz. There are not, UK politicians don't have their own glam squads. I'll just put it that way, and it's a very, very, very different environment.
And also we've tried to import some of the stuff from America, haven't we? The spin room, the feel of the convention. And I went to the convention in Madison Square Garden where they appointed the Democrats. Oh, Chris has arrived. Hello. Where they nominated Bill Clinton. And, we have ours in old hotel ballrooms. This was Madison Square Garden, guys. Yep. And the letters, like Theresa May's letters, did not fall off the back of the stage. And the balloons work. Yeah. And it's not just a load of empty seats. It's quite... The American politics rightly is seen as showbiz and thus superficial and everything else, but there's a difference, says Laura Kay.
There is a difference. It's bigger and it's glossier, and there's absolutely loads and loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of money involved. And Harris, actually, one of the things she did do successfully in her campaign, which was criticised for all sorts of other reasons, is she raised enormous amounts of moolah very, 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 very fast. And, she had like Beyonce and Oprah, and I remember David Cameron once had Gary Barlow, but it doesn't quite match up really, does it? Hello, Chris.
Hello, you okay?
Well, thank
Even
you.
the
How about
balloons
you?
work, do they, in the United States? Oh. Incredible. No, I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, good. Nice to be part of the weekend newscasting gang.
Anything going on?
Well, enough to keep me busy, yeah, It's been, I've had a morning of, it's always glamorous, isn't it, reporting, standing in the street in South London.
My own personal old favourite.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a wholesome reporting pursuit. It's as close as we got to the actual declaration of the Labour leadership contest. Anyone would think the party didn't want to make a great fuss of it.
Because it wasn't their woman. It wasn't Downing Street's woman.
That's true, but also it was a contest they could have just done without. Yeah. Coming about as a result of circumstances, as a result of Angela Rayner having to resign back in that first week of September, triggering a vacancy that they'd have rather not had, and then running a contest which inevitably, because it's the nature of an internal contest within a party that involves a public conversation about whether they're doing well or not, broad conclusion internally they're not, as outwardly the polls illustrate, and then away we've gone with this contest over the last few weeks, and then this result with me stood in the street alongside some other reporters, and it all happening inside.
Let's then bring people the result in case they haven't been glued to their phone or their television, eagerly awaiting the result of the Labour Deputy Leadership Contest this morning.
I shouldn't be thought that I had these in my head to newscasters who are listening.
Did you not memorise them?
No.
Put the
You're
paper
looking
down,
every
we'll
inch
test
the
you.
returning officer right now, actually. Are you going to say, I hereby declare?
I hereby declare. I'm not going to lose anything. If you're bringing me up as a returning officer look, better than the geography teacher look I normally bring.
I think you are
Nothing wrong with
less
geography.
geography teacher.
Don't, please don't say.
No, but there's no corduroy today. That's a sharper jacket.
I hereby declare Lucy Powell, 87,407, which is 54%. Bridget Phillipson, 73,536, which is 46%. Total number of eligible voters, 970,000 and change. Total numbers of votes cast, much shorter, 160,000 and change. Turnout, 16.6%.
Yeah, so a couple of sort of headline thoughts. The favourite from the outset won. We should sort of make that perfectly clear.
Was she the favourite at the very beginning?
Well, okay, fair. One certainly wants to go down to the last two.
Yes.
Because there's a bit of rattling around before that, wasn't there?
Yeah.
But it wasn't as clear-cut a win as some thought it might well be. I mean, there was a 14,000 vote gap, so she clearly won. But 54-46 is not a, to the extent to which people were seeing this as a verdict from the party on how the government is doing and how Keir Starmer is doing. It wasn't a sort of overwhelming crushing of the candidate who was seen to personify the government in Bridget Phillipson, who sits around the cabinet table. And as Laura, you've written in the last few weeks, sometimes the differences between these two candidates were exaggerated.
Oh, completely.
To women from the north of England who sat around the same cabinet table until 7 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But there were differences, there were subtleties, and Lucy Powell, outside of government, was more willing to articulate her critique of government and critique of Downing Street publicly in the process of seeking the votes that she amassed.
But that was essentially difference, wasn't it? And the person who won is the candidate who would be more willing to make themselves a pain, maybe even in public, in order to get things done, than the person who's literally on the government payroll. And Lucy Powell, a couple of weeks ago, didn't answer our question about whether she'd ever be willing to vote against the government, which is quite interesting. I mean, I think that's unlikely. But if there was a policy that she as deputy leader had tried to stop or had tried to change and she felt really hacked off, actually, technically, she's not a member of the government. So that would be an unlikely thing. But she positioned herself as being, I'll be a critical friend rather than I'm someone who is completely part of the tribe.
And that'll be the fascinating dynamic when a moment comes up
Yeah.
where there is a potential division between Labour backbenchers or a sizable chunk of them and the government. And it is her own personal decision. It's not a collective responsibility.
Yeah.
So she would have to decide in that instance and face, public questioning as to whether or not she's going to back the government or not, and with significant influence depending on which way she decides to go.
Because I spoke to David Blunkett, now Lord Blunkett, a Labour big beast, who said if he'd got his hands on the process, they'd never have run a vote because they're in office now. So you don't need a deputy leader of the party. You've got a deputy prime minister.
Yeah, and the party's got a chair as well. So there are roles within the party structure that can be the voice of the party as opposed to a voice in the government. But that's back to the thing where they'd have rather not had to run all the way through this. But what's been fascinating, so when we were doing our loitering in the street, the whole thing happened.
Is that what you call it?
Well, that's kind of what it was, really.
Because it's been called reporting by the BBC.
Oh, well, we tried a bit of that when there was people to talk to, but there are vast swathes of time when there aren't, So they all go in.
That's what these things are for.
Well, there was a bit. Well, we were watching it on those things, and texting away and all the rest of it. But afterwards, we were like, okay, it's all finished. And various people are leaving. There weren't that many people in there at all. I think the only people left in there were the Prime Minister, Lucy Powell and Bridget Phillipson. And sure enough, the two of them, the Prime Minister and Lucy Powell, were having a meeting. And since then, there's been a sort of, glossy picture of them coming out. Alas, no words. And it's extraordinary, isn't it? That it's 7 weeks ago since he sacked her.
I know.
I mean, this is a funny old business politics, and there she is, and they saying, "Oh, wonderful to have you," and blah blah blah.
And when I sacked you, what I really meant was I was looking forward to your immediate return
within
another role.
Yeah, exactly. The next month, the very next month.
Not at my behest.
And in a role that I can't sack you from.
Yeah,
unlike the previous one.
Because now she has her own mandate, which is the important thing to understand about the deputy leader, is they can't be fired. So they can waltz off in a strop, but they can't be fired. And they have their own mandate for the membership. And that's why this role matters. So and there are people in government who've been very dismissive of the chances of Lucy Powell being able to actually exert any influence at all. Some of them are rather cattling, it has to be said. But that's the power that she's got, is he can't make her go away unless she makes some terrible mess up. And that's also why deputy leaders over the years there've been very, very different partnerships. So you had we talked about this, you reported on it a lot in the campaign as well. you have the Jeremy Corbyn versus Tom Watson. Really tense, really different agendas, having a terrible, torrid time. Or whether you have the sort of Prescott, I'll be the bluff supporter
thing,
to you, Tony Blair, and I'll be very, very loyal. I'll speak our messages in a slightly different tone, but I'll be that kind of loyal protector almost. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the thing goes. I was piqued, or my interest was piqued by what she said about reform.
I was just
when
about
she
to mention
spoke
this,
just afterwards.
not out reforming reform.
But more than that, she said, we've let Farage run away with it.
Yes.
Which was quite
and losing the megaphone of politics, as she said. So, and that's a direct, the not out reforming reform thing is a direct critique of the Prime Minister's conference speech of just a couple of weeks ago that was all about taking the fight to reform and how that is done and the tone and language in which it's done.
We can hear that in this little clip of Lucy Powell saying how she'll change the culture.
People feel that this government is not being bold enough in delivering the kind of change we promised. I'll be a champion for our Labour values and boldness in everything we do. And I know that you, Keir, as our leader, you want that too, and I will be your ally in that fight. It starts with us wrestling back the political megaphone and setting the agenda more strongly. Because let's be honest, we've let Farage and his ilk run away with it.
Ouch for the Prime Minister, sitting in the front row, listening to this former cabinet colleague who he sacked, offering publicly that critique back. I mean, they're a little window into this dynamic. I was chatting to Lucy Powell afterwards. There was a bit of an event with various Labour activists in a park down the road in the rain, and just to ramp up the sort of glamour of my morning, and she was saying, and this is back to the point that you've made, Laura, around not overdoing either the differences between the two candidates or necessarily how Lucy Powell now sort of prosecute the job, although let's see. But she explicitly said, I mean, you probably would say this on day one in this job, wouldn't you? But she did explicitly say, in terms, I'll do most of my grumbling in private.
Yeah.
But then most, or whatever. How does that? And as I say, there are going to be moments where we journalistically and perfectly reasonably will be seeking her view on issues that are contentious within the party and within the government, and where she won't be able to say, the view she articulates will be her own. It won't be one that's forced upon her.
And she is already on the record, for example, on things like getting rid of some of the limits on benefits for big families. She's already said the government should get rid of what's known as the 2-child benefit cap, although it's not child benefit, which always annoys me. It's actually about different kinds of benefits, but that's what it's known as. So she's already said that's got to go. The government wants to do that, but they might not.
Somebody said to me earlier on that one of the consequences, as they saw it, because they are an advocate of losing that 2-child cap, they saw that a positive outcome of this contest was a real racing ahead of that argument that has been going on within Labour for a while. I mean, Keir Starmer was saying in opposition it was, as he saw it, a good Labour thing they wouldn't be able to afford to do in his judgment. But this contest has come at a time where that argument has stepped up, not least because both of the final two candidates, including Bridget Phillipson as well, making that argument publicly that it had to happen, and so pushing that argument along ahead of the budget.
So older newscasters will remember a satirical show called The Thick of It, in which a fictional government trying to maintain its hands on policy and serious issues is constantly assuaged by events that you can't control of a more ridiculous nature piling up. So there is nothing funny and satirical about the actual news event that we are talking about. So that just as they're running their deputy leadership campaign with the candidate that Downing Street did not want to win, just as that's actually happening, in marches a gigantic news event, Chris.
And there's an extra layer of absurdity here, Paddy, because on this weekend where we're finding out the result of the deputy leader of the Labour Party, who is it within the Labour Party who is making the announcements? It is the chair of the National Executive Committee of the party, who just so happens to be the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, who was another person, therefore, who rolled up and got out of a car, and to whom we could shout a governance question rather than a political one, which is how on earth has the country collectively managed to lose perhaps one of the most high-profile criminals of the last couple of months?
So Hadush Kebatu is the man who was jailed for sexually assaulting a 14-year-old girl and a woman in Epping in Essex while staying in the asylum hotel The Bell, which was the absolute fulcrum of anxiety and protest and upset
All
on
summer.
all sides all summer. Unless you've been living under a rock, you don't need me to tell you that he was set free in error just weeks after being sent to jail. He was meant to be being sent to a migration centre to then be deported. And instead, as videos seen all over social media shows, he was given his things and allowed to wander off. Now, we're recording at 2:29 on Saturday, so perhaps by the time this reaches your ears, he will have been found. We know he's been spotted in London, but this really is one of these stories where you just think you could not make this up. And, you know, it's sort of someone in the Labour Party was suggesting to me with a slightly acidly, but in jest, that this is kind of, you know, peak phase 2. Remember Keir Starmer beginning of phase 2, it's going to be fantastic. We're going to start showing that we're in charge. We know the first year's been tricky, but oh, brilliant, off we go. Actually, phase 2, you've had Rayner gone, Mandelson gone, deputy leadership contest that they didn't want.
China row,
migrant one in, one out policy being a hokey-cokey rather than something that right now looks like it might make any meaningful difference. And now this.
And it's but those moments where you hit the phones as a reporter and you hear down it either just sort of sighs or something utterly unbroadcastable along the lines of, for goodness sake, because, I mean, of all people. And again, just playing into that sense, it's a phase 2 thing, but there's that broader sense of, and particularly actually in the context of the small boats row, which so often comes back to incredibly visible daily state failure and in a failure to be able to deliver what this government and its predecessor have said they've tried to do. Yeah. And this an element of that way where people, and is utterly understandable instantly as well, of what? How on earth does that happen?
Yeah. So I went to Liverpool Street Station in London, which is where it's quite possible that this man exited the train. We know he boarded a train at Chelmsford. It seems likely he got off at Liverpool Street. So I asked people getting off the train 24 hours later what they made of it all. And many people are furious. But there's also a feeling among 2 people I spoke to there that actually the prison service is in crisis. The prison service was not invented by the new Labour government, who only arrived a year and change ago. They've been releasing prisoners. The Conservatives voted against releasing prisoners. Some 200 plus prisoners are released by accident every year anyway. So there is a problem. Why aren't we in the media reporting on the problem of releasing the wrong prisoners before this man was released?
Well, that's right. And it was one of the things the government felt compelled to do when they moved in, was actually release many, many prisoners because the prison service was about to collapse. So, you know, there may well be public sympathy for that in that regard. But also, without question, even if many people and newscasters are feeling sympathetic because it's been a long-running crisis, in the politics of it, it's just an absolute shocker.
Yeah, David Lammy says he's appalled and livid.
But you
Not
see,
just appalled, he's livid.
But you can't really be appalled and livid about the thing that has happened that's appalling that you're in charge of. Well, you can, but that doesn't solve your problem, does it?
And this in the week where the other element of the whole small boat story, the whole one in, one out, and then back in again, that sort of sense again. And you know, and they can point to teething problems. They can point to that the system works because their biometrics have been taken, and so they very quickly established that it was the same guy who'd come across before. But that where, if you like, the building blocks of attempting to manage this incredibly tricky issue around small boats, twice in a handful of days, has spectacularly and very publicly failed.
And as you say, I think it's absolutely right. When one of the things about this government that they would say in private is actually their biggest mission and their biggest fear is that they are desperate to show to a sensible middle-sized democracy that actually democracy can give them governments that can get things done on their behalf. That's their big challenge, which takes us back to what Lucy Powell was saying.
Completely that.
And all of these incidents just give you again and again that impression that the Jenga tower is just really, 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 really shaky.
And not least because at the heart of that, and when I speak to senior folk in government, it's taking on that point, is that that sort of central challenge that this government faces between now and the next election, which is that can it make the case that a government like it can credibly govern, do stuff, achieve stuff, deliver on whatever else it sets out to, because they fear if they can't, then they're going to lose. And right now, you know, we can see the arguments that Nigel Farage is making. And when he can point to clear-cut, transparent incidents of repeated failure, that perhaps makes it easier for him to convince those who might not yet be convinced that maybe it's worth a roll of the dice, because it, in the view of many, might not have worked under the Conservatives and might not have worked under Labour.
State failure. And we know that we see problems for the Tories, who ran the country for 14 years, in saying that they didn't have fingerprints on the problem as well. But on the other hand, I said that twice now, this is still a massive catastrophe, really, for Labour on their big weekend. So that's really why we had to have you, because we can't have this news narmy on our own.
Well, that is it's great to be here at this is to see the weekend duo. This is
how the sausage is made.
It's how the sausage is made.
Yeah.
It's possible that we might all be on together. Allegedly, we're doing 25 hours of newscast.
Adam's doing 25 hours.
Yes.
Goodness.
Which will make a podcast almost as long as some of the Brexit cast ones we used to do.
Or almost as long as this one has felt. Only joking. What are you doing tomorrow?
So we will hear calls from the historian Andrew Loney to release the travel logs of Prince Andrew when he was trade representative for a decade. And you have Kamala Harris.
More of our interview with Kamala Harris, yes. And we will also tomorrow, that full interview will appear miraculously in your ears too on this newscast feed.
And Chris, you've described your job as damp loitering, if I understand it correctly.
Broadly that, yeah.
So I don't think that's fair. I didn't say that. So tomorrow, do you have finally a day off?
Yes, I am intending, as Laura knows all too well, saying this sentence out loud is a massive hostage to fortune. But I am intending tomorrow, beyond tilting my eyes and ears in the direction of your broadcasting, to have a day where I'm not entirely glued to this the entire time on my phone. And but for now it's back to. I've just been looking at some archive of Dennis Healey.
Goodness.
So we talk about deputy leaders and all of that. Trying to sort of. But you do a little bit of a knock back to history as we pull together a little TV piece. A bit of that yet.
Great.
And a day off with a bit of luck.
Very good. We will have Wes Streeting as well, the Health Secretary, who is with us tomorrow morning. So lots to talk to him about, including Labour's various shockers of the week. And we didn't even mention getting absolutely smashed to bits and losing a seat in Wales that they hadn't lost for a century. So that goes on the list too.
11%.
I just say, I warn you now that the podcast's over.
Thank
and
you.
The two of you, politically attuned as you are, can't have another topic at this hour. Yeah. So we say,
spoiling my fun.
We say thank you.
We're just being faded out.
That's what they do on Saturdays.
to the sound of rainfall. Thank you very much for watching, listening, and bothering.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.